Welcome to Before They Change the World, where we explore the minds, ideas, and dreams of exceptional students working on inspiring projects before they change the world. This episode is hosted by me, David, and I speak with Jessica, who is doing a PhD in environmental engineering at ETH. She's also the founder of RiverX, a project aimed at building a low-cost water monitoring network. We speak about her transition from mechanical to environmental engineering, her experience as a woman in STEM fields, her YouTube channel, the inception of her project, and how it's been to combine her biggest hobby of kayaking with her PhD research. I was super inspired by Jessica's willingness to throw herself into the deep end of new fields she's unfamiliar with and how she's shared her journey with the world. Just like a podcast episode was the trigger for her to switch fields, I hope this episode makes you reflect on your own career path and be less intimidated by unexplored fields. All right, here's Jessica. So, first of all, I want to say that actually it's crazy that I'm sitting here with you on the podcast. Like, you don't know this, but before I even got to ETH, I think I watched one of your videos, probably one of the first ones that kind of blew up a bit. And yeah, I would have never thought, that like 5 years into the future, I would be like sitting with you, interviewing you, talking with you on a podcast.
Yeah. I also never thought that. I think the video that you watched was probably like a day in life of a mechanical engineer. Yeah. And I never thought that posting that video would, it has like, I think millions of views or something like that. And I didn't think that, people still ask me in the Mensa, in the cafeteria, they're like, oh. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so I didn't think, I don't know. It's just kind of funny how things.
Yeah. So like, because at that point when you published that episode or that video, your channel was quite small, right?
It was small. I don't know how small it was, but it was relatively small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
my channel is still small, so.
Well, you can always put it in relative terms, yeah. But I think it's the biggest ETH student channel. So in those terms, It's quite big, right?
If you put it like that.
Yeah. That's maybe a bit of a specific way of putting it, but still, I'm also trying to put videos out there about ETH, and I also sometimes get this effect of people asking me, oh, you're the person from this video or that. So, I can only imagine that at your scale, which is several times higher or bigger, you might be getting quite a few of these interactions of like people that know you and you don't know anything about them.
Well, sometimes people also just yell at me from across the street.
Really?
Like at the bus stop, and then I don't know what to say, and I'm like, yeah.
Wait, what do they say?
They're like, oh, you're that girl from that YouTube channel. And then I'm really embarrassed. And then I'm like, no, that's not me. Yeah.
Okay, so aside from these awkward interactions, have there been like intangible benefits that you've gotten that you were not expecting, when you started to like put videos out there? Benefits or effects? Like it can be.
Benefits and effects, intangible. I don't know. I don't think it was. Nothing crazy has happened. But one thing that was really cool is that I was contacted by this school, and I can't remember their name, a few years ago, and it's a kind of like a gap year program for high school students in Germany between high school and Hochschule, where young women can go and they can try out programming, building their own, quadcopters and building things with robotics, learning laser cutting, and they can kind of do it in a safe space where they don't feel the pressure to perform or something like that. And it's just for young women. And so they flew me to Hamburg and they asked me to hang out with the girls for, I think we were there for 4 days, and I sat in on the classes. And I think that was the coolest thing that I did. And just hanging out with a bunch of 19, 20-year-old.
Awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. And so that was something that really crazy that happened. The other thing is that Autodesk flew me to Dresden for a conference, and I just had to vlog being at the conference. But it was really cool.
Wow.
At the time, I only use SolidWorks, so I don't use AutoCAD or anything. But
you had to pretend
I learned.
Okay.
No, I mean the conference was for all of their clients, so it was like using Fusion 360. And I even met a guy that built something in AutoCAD, and then he went on Höhle der Löwen, and he won money, and so it was cool to like talk to all of these people and these young, Anyway, so I think those are the two coolest things that have come like unexpected that came out of YouTube.
So how did you actually get started with, like, what was the initial spark or the drive that made you start sharing things with the world?
For me, it was just I wanted to create a library of my female colleagues that were in STEM, so in science, mostly in engineering, because I came here for my master's and I didn't like hearing these constant excuses like, oh, but there are no women in engineering. And it's not true. And so I thought if I create this library and put it online, then maybe it brings more awareness to people that there are women in engineering.
So actually, what are some of like these badass women that you've met? Because I think that's how you label it in like, you have a series on your channel, I think. What are some of these amazing women that you've met like in your journey?
I think most of them are my female colleagues in the masters. So it would be people that I met in classes, also through LIMES, like the women mechanical, I don't remember, the Women Mechanical Engineering Club at ETH.
Yeah.
But and then they all go on and do really crazy things with their lives. It's just kind of like what you're doing right now, like interviewing people. Maybe one day we'll all go on to do crazy things with our lives.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So, and you're, just to like fill in our viewers with your journey academically, where do you come from? Where did you do your undergraduate? Why did you come to? How did you end up here? And all these things.
I like to tell my story along the St. Lawrence River.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So for people that don't know, the St. Lawrence is like the 13th largest river in the world.
Okay. In terms of water flow or in terms of length?
I think in terms of length.
Okay.
So it goes through the Great Lakes of Canada. And I was born in Niagara Falls, which is along the St. Lawrence. And then if you go downstream, I grew up kayaking on a river called the Ottawa River, and when those two confluence, they confluence in Montreal. So I was born in Niagara Falls, I grew up kayaking in Ottawa, and then in Montreal, that's where I did my bachelor's at McGill University.
Such a pretty story. Now I know why you're into kayaking.
And so I did my bachelor's in aeronautical engineering. So it was mechanical engineering with a focus in aeronautical engineering. So I had to do extra courses at McGill. Yeah. Cool. And then afterwards, I wanted to go somewhere new, and I considered going to UBC. But in the end, I got accepted to ETH, so I came to Switzerland for the master's in mechanical engineering.
Okay. And then, so you did your master's here, and you chose ETH because of like...
quite boring. I just I just looked up like the top universities. Delft was too expensive. There's also no water in Delft. I mean, for whitewater kayaking.
Yeah, I mean, there's water, but it doesn't move much.
Exactly. So then there was ETH, and that's how I ended up here.
But water was a factor.
Yes.
No, I can see why Switzerland would be a good location if you like outdoors and stuff. And we'll get to that in a bit as well. But then you finished your master's, and your master's was kind of this phase where you also started to grow your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, I think it was near the end of my master's.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Okay. Don't worry, it's all blurry. Yeah, no, but I do remember when you were doing this like video that blew up, that got millions of views, a day in the life. That was during your thesis, right?
That was during my master's thesis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, then it's at the end. Okay, and then what happened after that? After you finished your thesis?
Yeah. After that, I considered doing a PhD in. So my topic in my master's was thermoacoustic coupling. So I was looking at internal flows of combustion engines. And I had considered doing a PhD in that topic. But before that, I thought maybe it would be good to get some working experience to see if I really would, like, after I get the PhD, I would end up working anyway. So maybe if I don't like that that job, I don't want to do a PhD. So I worked in Baden for a year, just as an internship at a gas turbine company. And in the end, I didn't like it.
Okay, well, so that was a good choice then.
Yeah, it was a good choice. Nice. And so I was also in this kind of transition phase where I was trying to think, oh, what do I do? I don't want to stay in combustion. I don't want to do gas turbines because they're going to be phased out in the next 20 years or even before then. Yeah. So I was trying to figure out what I should do. And then I listened to this podcast. Have you heard of Ologies?
No. No.
It's a really great podcast. Okay, sorry, I'm promoting another podcast.
No. I love podcasts.
It's this science comedian, Ali Ward. Every podcast episode, she interviews a different ologist. So psychologist, biologist, mycologist, any type of ologist. Okay. So, I mean, she has like one episode about sharks and it's great.
Okay. I'll check it out. Yeah. Nice.
But the one podcast episode I was listening to, it was called Conservation Technology. So she was interviewing conservation technologists. Yeah. So it was a guy that worked for Boeing, also a combustion engineer, and then switched to a company called Conservation X. And I think it was a startup at the time. And basically they create technology for ocean conservation. And my mind was blown when I heard that podcast. Right. I was like, what? You could do that? You could apply technology to the environment? Because I feel like so much of my personality of what I love in the world is rivers. And then I thought, why I should do that, exactly that, but for rivers.
Wow.
And in that moment
what
I decided.
A eureka moment.
Yeah. And then in that moment I decided to change my entire career path. Yeah.
Wow. That's so inspiring. Yeah, because like this guy also basically switched from combustion modeling, I guess, and stuff like that, to then environmental applications of the same principles or sciences and technologies that he was an expert in. So awesome. So at that point, after your internship, after listening to this podcast, you decided to switch, and then what?
So I was starting to speak to a bunch of my kayaking friends, because a lot of my kayaking friends actually study rivers. And I was asking them, I want to build something for rivers, like what do you need? Yeah. And then one of my friends, she's a postdoc in Colorado, studying wood morphology. So like how wood travels down the river and how it affects river dynamics. Also super cool topic. Yeah. Hot topic at the moment, if you didn't know, wood morphology. And she was like, it would be really useful, a low-cost turbidity sensor. And I was like,
what?
Cool. I mean, I know something about turbulence. And she was like, that's not what it is.
Okay, that's what I thought as well. I also did aerospace. And when I read turbidity sensor for the first time, I thought, like, why is she measuring turbulence in rivers?
Exactly. And I was like, great. And she was like, no, that's not it. And I was like, okay. And then I read more about it. And basically what it is, it's a sensor that measures how cloudy water is.
Oh, okay.
So how milky the water is from the suspended material. Yeah, and then I decided, if other people have built this sensor before, I should be able to do it. I mean, that's kind of been my approach to everything, which is a blessing and a curse, because sometimes I get myself into situations that are not so smart, like climbing some mountain that I'm not prepared for. So in this case, I was like, okay, well, I mean, the sensor exists. It's just super expensive.
Like how much?
Anywhere from 2,000 to 100,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and they were like, they want a low-cost version. And I was like, I mean, it exists, so the technology is there. It's not inventing something new. It's just figuring out how to make it cheaper.
So the SpaceX for turbidity sensors.
Yeah, I guess that's what.
I mean, Elon Musk was also like, okay, so we have rockets, and then he started to break down with first principles, like how much do the components of what go into rocket costs, and he found out, okay, it's much lower than what they actually cost to launch.
Okay.
But maybe that was not exactly how you approached it.
Yeah, and then I had to find a way to do the project. So I considered starting a company or a startup, but the issue is that I'm a foreigner in Switzerland, and so I didn't have a visa. So I thought maybe a better option would be to do a PhD. And so I pitched the idea to, I don't know how many supervisors I emailed. I think I emailed like 30 people at not at ETH, like all across Switzerland, EPFL, University Bern, the different research institutes in Zurich. Like we have ERWAG, the Water Aquatic Research Institute, or WSL, the Snow and Forest Research Institute. And in the end, one supervisor liked the idea. And he was like, okay, let's write a grant together. But keep in mind, he didn't know anything about me, so he was taking a risk. Also, I don't know anything about building sensors. Like,
wow.
So I felt kind of, it was a struggle for me because I didn't want to end up like, you know, Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah, I know her. Seen her in the news.
Yeah, and so I didn't want to promise something and then not be able to deliver. Yeah, so I felt like I was putting myself under a lot of pressure, but at the same time, I really wanted to do it. And I thought, I mean, why shouldn't I be able to do it?
Right.
So we wrote the grant, and then that was done. That was in February 2019.
Okay.
And then we would find out in the summer if I got the grant.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, some other people heard about my project, and so I got a job in Berlin, and as a ecology researcher.
Okay.
And I'm not an ecologist either.
Wow.
But they were like, oh yeah, there's this girl, she has a mechanical engineering degree, she loves rivers, and she's going to be building a turbidity sensor. We should hire her. So I moved to Berlin for 6 months, and I went kayaking, and I helped install some electronics that they had. I learned something about turbidity. I learned something about rivers. I learned something about ecology. And then in that time, I got the grant. So I moved back a year later, the February 2020, and I started the PhD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So how did they find out about you in the first place? Like, because this project was not even, you know, I mean, I guess you weren't, I mean, you had maybe a blog about it, but...
No, it was all word of mouth because... honestly, I think the kayaking community, it's such a small community and everyone knows everyone. And so the person that hired me in Berlin, he was a senior scientist there. Now he's a professor in Innsbruck, and he's also a kayaker.
Okay. Okay, nice.
So that's kind of how...
Okay. Yeah. So you were at that time then doing kayaking here in Switzerland?
Yeah, and in Austria and in France, in the Alps.
Wow. Okay. And... yeah, no, that's amazing. So you somehow found a way to turn your hobby into like your work and like have a very close relationship between the two. So how has that experience actually been? Where you know now when you're doing your hobby, when you're out there kayaking, you're probably thinking a lot about what's going on in the water and your project and like I put a sensor there and like this would be a nice place to install something like. How does that
Yeah, honestly, it's for me, it's the most rewarding thing because I always felt like I had these two parts of myself. And once I finally let go of mechanical engineering and just took those skills, I mean, I never really let go of mechanical engineering. I kind of just let go of combustion, I would say, but all those skills are transferable. And then I chose to apply it to rivers, and I think that's been the most rewarding thing. And now, I mean, I learned so much about rivers. Like every time I'm kayaking, some rivers you can hear the stones rolling on the bottom of the river. And I remember the first time I heard that, and I was like, yeah, how do I measure that? Like, that would be so cool.
Nice. Okay, so I want to ask a question that maybe comes out of nowhere, but I have reasons to believe that maybe it's linked to this work that you were doing in Berlin. How did you end up in the middle of nowhere in like Albania and like this river, I don't even know the name, like kayaking alone with a turbidity sensor strapped to your kayak? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so the river is the Vjosa River. And it is, I don't know if people are watching or listening, but I'm doing quotes. It is the last and largest free-flowing river in Europe. So its entire stretch from its headwaters to the sea is unimpeded. And that's not normal in Europe. Normally there are barriers or channelized sections in every single big river in Europe. So it's quite a special river. And there's been a lot of campaigns from Patagonia, from National Geographic, from a bunch of different sources trying to protect that river. And so the project in Berlin, they were actually studying the ecology of that river. And they needed to install those turbidity sensors. They actually got the expensive ones that we were discussing. And they needed someone to install them. So that's kind of the job that I got and how I ended up there. And then my supervisor was like, yeah, why don't we just get like a profile, a longitudinal profile, like put the sensor on the boat and we see what happens. And so that's what happened. It takes 3 days to kayak down the river. Super cool. Also, there are some rapids, so a little stressful when you have $7,000 connected to your kayak.
And your life? Because you're alone?
Exactly. Yeah, so... but then they would be driving along to like pick me up or something like that. So not completely alone. And then we ended up getting these profiles and nothing came out of that. But then in my PhD, it kind of all came back together. So I'm just now submitting the paper for that, for those profiles. So I think that project has been 5 years in the making. Like I've had to go and kayak the river 2 more times with the sensor, get more data, and it's so beautiful there. I really love going back.
I mean, I watched the video, and I mean, one of the questions you just answered, which is how did you get such amazing drone shots if you were going alone, which I guess was your team. But yeah, like that landscape looks insanely beautiful, and the river color and everything is just crazy. Like when I was watching that, I love outdoors as well and hobbies, and I've never done kayaking like that. But when I was watching that, I thought, wow, I should really try this.
You should.
It just feels so amazing. I mean, at points it looks a bit dangerous, but I guess you can always start easier. If you had to recommend someone to get started with kayaking here in Switzerland, what would you say?
The university club actually has classes. You can take a course. They have beginners courses. In the winter they have pool training courses, so you could learn to do the roll.
Nice.
I would say that is the best way.
And then in the summer they organize trips somewhere? They organize
trips to rivers almost just as beautiful as that one.
Nice.
I'll show you some photos after.
Okay, sick. So, you were saying like in that first trip, nothing came out of that. And I'm kind of trying to unpack, a bit of the technical details behind what you're trying to do. So, what kind of data are you trying to gather, and why is it useful? Who finds it useful?
So, I mean, specifically for that project, It's a European project, money that they have for that project. And I think the reason, I mean, I'm not an ecologist, but I think the reason that they wanted the turbidity data is because they wanted to know how much sunlight would cause biofilm, like would help biofilm growth on rocks or something like that. And I think the biofilm growth is affected by sunlight. I don't know. Bacteria, light, algae. I'm sure it's all connected somehow.
But I see that your focus is more on the actual, like, how do we get good data?
Yeah, so when I was there, that was my job. It was just to install them in locations. I mean, it's also kind of an art, like where can you put the sensors that when a storm comes, they're not going to get flushed away, hit with giant boulders or logs. Where can they get like a representative cross-section of the entire river? Because if you put them in kind of a stagnant part of the river, then maybe it doesn't represent the entire river section. So that was kind of my job. It was to figure out where to place them. And now in my PhD, I know what I need the data for. So it's completely different than what the ecologists need the data for. And so, I mean, what I'm doing in my PhD, I guess, spoiler, I'm doing a PhD now. And I'm in the last year. And I'm looking more at these, like the dynamics of the sediment in the rivers. So the turbidity sensor measures how cloudy the water is, and the water becomes more cloudy with more suspended sediment. That's the sediment that is like carried by the river because it's so light. And the sediment, like there's more or there's less sediment in the river for a bunch of different reasons. Maybe there's construction, or there's runoff from a city, or there's deforestation, and then there are no trees, roots that hold the sediment on the banks. And so then when there's rainfall, a lot of sediment ends up in the water, or maybe there are glaciers that are melting really quickly or in special ways, and then they end up also bringing sediment to the water. So you can really, I mean, this question about like measuring the suspended sediment is really important, which is why I wanted to make a low-cost sensor for all of those questions. So glacial erosion, deforestation,
Also, like potentially like contamination of the river.
So usually pollutants, they bind to sediments, and so sediments, they carry pollutants downstream. And
from that like measurement of the sensor, can you get information? Like, is it a quantity of sediment, or is it also more richer information? Like what turbidity basically measure, it's a proxy for the suspended sediment concentration. So it's the grams per liter. But not the type. Like, how would you discern the type?
So I think the more expensive sensors, they would do, or I know that the more expensive sensors, they usually measure grain size distribution, which still doesn't tell you the type of minerals. I don't know if I'm sure there are some very expensive lab tech. I mean, you can do mineralogy to determine the type of minerals, but not in situ that I know of.
So even with the cheaper sensors, you could do something?
No,
because that.
The only methods I know of are lab techniques.
So the goal of when you presented this grant, the proposal was to basically make cheaper sensors that would have certain performance, I guess. And did you talk about the downstream application of that you wanted to create like a network of these sensors, or how?
Yeah, so because just creating a sensor isn't like PhD worthy, my supervisor, he actually wrote the scientific part of that because I wasn't qualified. I'm not a hydrologist. And so I wrote the technical part, and the original idea was actually to use, there are little turbidity sensors in like the dishwasher, So dishwasher and washing machine, and like when the water is super dirty, I guess it turns off or it switches cycles or something like that. And so my original proposal was to use those. It wasn't good enough, so I had to build my own.
Okay. Ignorance is bliss, I guess.
Exactly. And then he wrote the application part, which was right now, because sensors are so expensive, satellite imagery, open access satellite imagery doesn't have a high enough spatial resolution to look at small rivers. UAV flights, they don't have a high enough temporal resolution. You need someone to go out, you need manual labor, someone to go out and do UAV flights. So the alternative that we came up with was, why not create a sensor network with high spatial and temporal resolution data, and then the type of data we would get from that would be able to answer a bunch of new questions that have never been answered before.
Awesome.
So then that's the second part of my PhD that I'm working on now with the data.
Okay. So then, so there's been then different phases of your PhD. What was, like, how did you structure it? Because I guess one of the things you mentioned is that you figured out you had to build your own sensor.
Yeah.
So was that the first thing that kind of like slapped you in the face when you started?
Yeah, so I think I had my first year basically was dedicated to my first sensor.
Okay.
So it took me a year and a half to build the first good prototype. And then I did some tests in Switzerland, and I did some experiments in the lab, and then I published that as my first paper, because I guess here in ETH you need 2 papers submitted or accepted and 1 submitted to get a PhD. So that was the first part of my PhD. The second part, I ended up using those VIOSA data sets, and I also added some satellite imagery. So it's kind of completely separate than these homemade sensor stories. But I just, I didn't want that data to go to waste. It was really cool data sets, so I ended up writing my second paper about that. And then what I'm doing now in my last year is I've already done a second prototype this summer, and right now I'm working on my third prototype, and the plan will be to install it at various locations in Switzerland, collect some data, and then hopefully submit that, and that'll be the last part of my PhD.
Okay, yeah, so it's kind of bringing both things together, right? Okay, and
it's classified as a high-risk project by ETH. I was like, great.
Gives you a perfect sleep at night,
exactly.
I guess. Oh, wow. No, but a lot of respect for that, because it's not only that it's high risk, even for an expert, but you're mentioning that when you started the project, you weren't qualified in many of the things.
In nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
I mean, I've never, I had to learn Arduino.
Yeah.
The first month.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, I've programmed in C before and Python, whatever, but I've never played with a PCB in my life before starting.
Yeah, no, so. I also haven't. It seems so scary to me, that world. And electronics, I guess. I mean, you did aerospace and mechanical, so electronics, I guess, wasn't...
Nothing, no.
And then the whole science part of it, right? And like what turbidity even means.
Yeah.
You went from like, is this turbulence in a river to like doing a PhD on it. So that's crazy.
But I think... I always just think it's like when you write your first program in the bachelor's. For me, I remember looking and being like, there's no way I'm going to find this bug. No way. And then you find the bug, and it's super annoying because the next time you have that thought and you're like, I can't do it. You're like, but last time I could do it, so I could probably do it this time. And then that's kind of how it is. I'm always like, I won't be able to figure this out. And then I always figure it out, and then I'm like, fine, I guess I'll keep going.
Yeah.
And now I ended up here.
Okay, so you have a tenacity and don't give up easily on issues like this, bugs. But I guess what have been like, aside from, trivial bugs and like, I missed a comma, or like there was something very stupid here. Have there been like very big setbacks or like moments where you really questioned, if you were on the right path for your PhD or for this project?
I mean, yeah, but all the time.
Okay.
But I can't think of a specific one. I mean, yeah, sometimes the thing is, like, when you have a bachelor's in a specific topic, I feel like you know the limitations to some extent, or you know where to look for, the solution or who to ask. And so in electronics, because I was by myself. I was in a hydrology group, so no one knew anything about electronics. I had to seek out those people, like people that I could ask these questions to, be like, I have this idea, but I don't even know if it's possible in the world of electronics. Right. And then they would kind of give me different ideas.
Okay.
So even knowing that there are other, the end goal is that it exists.
Yeah.
So there just has to be a path there, I just had to find people to help me. Yeah.
What about COVID? Because it seems like you had to learn a lot and ask help from many people, and then there's a lockdown. I don't know exactly the timing of this with respect to what you were working on, but how did that affect you?
I started the PhD February 2020.
Oh, great! It's just
and I think 3 weeks later we were in lockdown.
Oh my God!
Yeah. And I got special permission to work at ETH. And I think all of the technicians had special permission to work at ETH. So I was lucky because I could go and I could ask them questions.
Nice.
Yeah. You should always be friends with the technicians. That is like,
take that away.
If you're gonna do a PhD, always be super nice to the technicians. Okay. I always spoke to them in German.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Wow. Oh, when you learned German here through language courses? Or?
In the beginning through language courses, and then a bit in Berlin. Yeah. And then now also I pay someone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then going back to YouTube in relation with your PhD. So you, what I've seen is that you were sharing all these struggles, learnings, your journey basically through your PhD on YouTube, right? And where did that motivation come from? Because YouTube started with like this STEMinine, women in STEM motivation, but then it became like basically a way to share your life as a PhD student.
Yeah. My struggle with YouTube, I call it. I think everyone has a struggle with YouTube. No, I started with this library that I made of women in STEM. Yeah. And then I think because of this video that blew up, I don't know, no one knows how the YouTube algorithm works, but I ended up having, I think, 80 or 85% male viewers. And all of the male viewers were like, all of the viewers were requesting different video types, but in the end, I didn't like what people wanted. So it was like, oh, share what's in your backpack, or what kind of calculator you use, or things like that. And I found it, I mean, it didn't interest me. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. And I didn't want to make videos like that. So then when I started to do more outdoorsy things, I thought, oh, that's great, because then I will post things that are important to me, like in the environment, my PhD journey. But I think it just didn't interest people. Yeah. I think it's just because already then YouTube was trying to serve that audience that I had acquired, and it wasn't what they wanted. Yeah. Who knows? So in the end, now I kind of just stopped. Okay. Yeah. But I'm fine with it.
Yeah. No, of course. But yeah, I'm wondering, do you see yourself going back to it? Because if the pure act of making a video is everything to you, then I guess you wouldn't really care about what the algorithm is doing. But it seems like there's also an element of there has to be an alignment, or I have to find my audience or my community on YouTube, and that's kind of what's missing, you feel?
So I think the opportunities from YouTube were really cool, like the ones that I mentioned earlier, and I learned a lot. And in the beginning, I was doing it because I wanted to also keep my options open. Maybe I wanted to be a science communicator. Maybe I wanted to have my own lab. And I also wanted to share, I don't know, the different projects in the lab. Yeah. And so I just kind of wanted to keep that window open for YouTube, for social media, Instagram, stuff like that. Yeah. But now that I am kind of certain about my path, YouTube doesn't really fit in there, or I don't think that it's gonna be, I don't know. I think the energy invested in it will take away from the energy where I should be investing my energy. Okay. That sentence, if it makes sense. Basically, I don't think the energy is worth it. Yeah, and also because now I don't think I want to be a science communicator. I want to work on this startup. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So before getting into what you're thinking of doing, there was a time where you were pondering the idea of like becoming a full-time creator. I don't know if that's like
science communication, or I was getting emails like, oh, I don't know, from different science networks, but I don't know if they were real. Okay. But they were like, oh, we're looking for a host for this like show or something like that. Like we're going to pitch it. Would you be interested? And so I always thought like, oh, maybe, this YouTube thing, if I keep it up, it could actually be a window to some sort of opportunity like that. Yeah. But now, I think I just like science too much. I think I like science a lot more than I like science communication. Right. So that's what I want to focus on. Okay, I see. So, so that leads me to the question of what's next, and when you finish your PhD, what do you see yourself doing? So I was also pondering staying in academia. But now a lot of people really want this sensor.
Oh, that's nice.
Which in my head I always call it the stupid sensor, because like it always has problems. I'm like, this stupid sensor. And then now I feel like I'm the turbidity girl. Because I feel like I'm the person, at least that I know, or at least in Europe, that is probably like the closest expert there is to turbidity measurement.
Yeah, I mean, it's so niche, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's very niche. Yeah. And so now I'm the turbidity girl.
Rebranding of the channel.
With a stupid sensor. And a lot of people want this stupid sensor. Maybe I shouldn't call it that.
You should probably rebrand that as well.
My prof calls it smart sensor.
Okay.
I mean, that's the name of the project.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called Smart Water Turbidity Sensing. Okay. So the smart sensor, and a lot of people want it, and I was going to a lot of these startup events, startup coaching courses, programs, and meeting with people, and all of these investors and different people, venture capitalists, they were really pushing me to start selling these sensors, but actually in the exact same way that they already exist, as expensive tools. Okay. And I don't really see the point of that. Like that's the complete opposite of why I started this project. Yeah. I mean,
they just see higher margins because it's cheaper for them.
Exactly. Yeah. So for them, their eyes light up and they're like, what? It's like 100 times cheaper. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, you have to hop on that. And like, but yeah, I don't see the point. Like my entire project is open source anyway. So I've also been struggling a bit the last year trying to figure out, well, how can I do this as a project? I call it a project and not a business yet, because it's not a business, it doesn't make money. I mean, but how can I do this project and still make enough to have a living, to keep it sustainable, like keep it running? Right. And so that's what I've been trying to figure out. And so now I have a way forward after the PhD, which will be, I know what I will want to do is I will install the sensors myself and I will take care of the installation, and I will take care of the locations and the data, and then I want to sell the data.
Okay.
Yeah.
To?
It will be industry, I mean, anyone that uses fresh water, lakes, rivers. So that could be an effluent stream from a manufacturing plant for cooling water. It can be to monitor hydropeaking, which is when there's a strong demand in electricity and the hydropower plants let go of a bunch of water, then the water levels are super high in the river, and usually a lot of organisms can't survive survive that. It's called hydropeaking. Yeah. So maybe I know in Switzerland municipalities want to start monitoring that. So things like that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I have a few questions. One is, you mentioned it's open source. So what does that actually mean? And do you see that, is that not a threat? Or how do you see that? Like, what was the decision there?
Yeah, it's really interesting, this entire idea of open source. I mean, I kind of feel like, how are patents allowed? Like, who allowed someone to just not allow someone else to build some, I don't know. I completely understand it's to give people the opportunity to not be copied by a bigger company, but in reality, bigger companies are going to copy you anyway if they want to, and they have lawyers. So having a patent doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to start a company and compete with the big guys. I think a better way forward is to not even rely on technology at all. Because, I mean, there are countries that don't respect patents and they copy technologies and then they sell the things for much cheaper. So then I started to think maybe relying on the technology isn't the right way forward anyway. So then I thought, maybe better is to actually sell the data. And then my idea would be to allow people to build their own sensors, private individuals. And then if they want to install their own sensor and hook it up to my system, then maybe I get their data, and then they get access to all of the data. Okay. So like a trade-off. Yeah. And they also have all of the building instructions. But of course, I mean, this business plan is in development, so maybe someone's listening and they're like, that's a horrible idea. You need to patent it. Or maybe someone's really angry right now. I'm not experienced enough to be able to tell, because I've never tried to patent anything. And I don't know how big the edge is, like that you have with the technology that you've developed. The question I always ask someone is when they say, well, why wouldn't you patent that? And then the question I always ask them back, well, why should I? And they say, every single time it's because you can make money. Every single time someone, and for me, I will find a way to make money. Yeah. I will get a job at some point when this fails. But I think there's much more value in creating an open source project than just creating a patent on a sensor that already exists and has patents. Like, I think there are different variations of this sensor. That's the other thing. Like, you can patent this sensor, but you can just change it a bit. And then someone else could make the same sensor. That's why there's like 20 different companies building turbidity sensors around the world.
Okay, I see. So do you think like that the community is strong enough that having it open source is going to actually, lead to the behavior that you were just describing of people building these sensors and then you would install them for them, or no, they would install it?
So the idea would be like 3 different types of customers. The first would be private individuals. They can buy or build. And then governments would be another. They wouldn't build, I'm assuming. And I'm also assuming that people like governments, they would want the same sensor with the same accuracy at multiple locations, not like a homemade and I don't think they're going to make the sensors themselves. And the same with the different companies.
Yeah.
So the idea would be that they would, like I would build the same sensors and install them with the same accuracy, and then they would have access to that data.
Okay, because where are the major hurdles, would you say, in this process? Like, how hard is it to build this sensor once you have access to these open source designs and like the instructions, and how hard is it to actually install it?
To build, I don't know anyone that has tried to build it. So I guess it's difficult, but I've tried to make it really easy. Like in like my last paper, I put like printouts of how to place them on the 3D printing bed, like so that they print perfectly, and all of the different parameters you have to select on the 3D printer. And I mean, yeah, I think it's not easy, but if I can do it, someone can do it. Like
that's your mantra.
Yeah, no, really. If I can build the sensor, and I couldn't even use Arduino 3 years ago, then someone else can that wants to build a sensor and has experience. Because I'm assuming those are the people that are going to want to build it. They can definitely build the sensor. And how to install it, that part is, I think, a little more tricky, because that's more of like an art. Like you have to also understand rivers. You don't want to go after a rainfall event or when there's high water, because when you install it, the water level drops, sensor is probably going to be out of the water. So you have to go when the water level is low and install it in the right location.
And what does installing actually mean? Like, where do you place it?
I usually put them like against bridges or big boulders. In the water. Submerged.
But like, so what are we talking about? Like, it's like a box?
Yeah, it's like, I guess people listening.
Yeah, they won't be able to.
Like 30 centimeter cylinder in length with a diameter of 90.
Yeah. And you're strapping this to something?
To a piece of rebar at the moment. And then what I do in my short-term installations is I like hammer the rebar into the side of the river and then wrap it around a tree or something like that. And in our long-term installations in Albania, we used a rock drill and drilled the rebar to like bridges. And you also have to make sure that like someone isn't going to swim into contact and get impaled by rebar. So all of these things you have to think about.
And in terms of like the placement to get the best data, what do you have to be thinking about? You have to have so like usually put it in an eddy. So like, you know, an eddy? So usually put it like an eddy, calm pool of water moving upstream from the main current, for the people that don't know what an eddy is. Maybe explain that in simpler language.
It's like the fluid on the side of the main current, the main stream, that's moving slowly in the opposite direction. And if it's very, very turbulent, then you get bubbles, and you don't want that because bubbles affect the measurements. But if it's too calm, then it's not representative of the mainstream. So you want kind of an eddy that's well mixed with the mainstream, so that it's representative of what's being measured. But measuring suspended sediment is an entire other field of science that people are... like it also matters like the depth. So it just depends on what kind of data you want. So it's like how far can it measure? It's a point measurement. It's exactly at that point. So you're not really interested in the absolute numbers. You know, what I would be interested in is if I have a sensor here and one upstream and one downstream, how does it change? Has it changed? Why has it changed? Is it because there was a rainfall event? The one upstream and the one downstream are both affected by rainfall. Why is the one in the middle not affected by rainfall? So those are the kinds of things that you're looking at.
And how many like what kind of resolution would you want along the river?
It depends on what kind of question you want answered.
Okay. But in this initial network that you want to, like in this pilot project, I guess, the first installations that you want to do yourself, what are you?
I actually have a meeting tomorrow with a potential client.
Okay. Cool.
Which would be in Ticino, which would make me super happy because it's so beautiful there.
Nice.
But yeah, that depends on what the client, what kind of data that they want. What are they trying to figure out?
Yeah.
Then I guess I would help them try to figure out where the sensors should go, how many they need. Yeah, things like that.
Okay, so it seems like you're trying to find pilot customers right now. And then I don't know how much investment you would need to actually execute on your vision. Will you just bootstrap it? Will you be looking for external investors at some point? How do you think about
my
this?
plan is to try to bootstrap.
Okay.
Yeah, so my plan right now is to... at the end of the PhD, I can buy my sensors from ETH, and it's open source, so I don't have to buy any patents from them. ETH doesn't own anything.
Oh, that's also nice, yeah, because I've heard that ETH IP laws or rules are a bit strict, and there's so many projects, so many spin-offs that are coming out of ETH that have to do this ETH transfer process. I don't know. So I guess for you, this open source makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, so at the end I will have to buy my sensors. My hope is that in the next year, maybe if I start working with a client, for free or for paid, I don't know yet, and then hopefully if I can generate immediate useful data for them based on whatever project we decide on. My hope is to pick a first pilot project where I could generate immediate useful data.
Yeah.
So then at the end of my PhD, if I can incorporate a company and that data is still useful, I can start charging for that first, for that data.
Yeah,
and if it's useful, hopefully they pay for it.
Right. Yeah. I think a great way to find out how useful it is to charge them. I've heard this a lot in the context of startups, that even if you're doing a pilot, you should be charging, because that's going to be a filter for you to find your most valuable customers as well.
Yeah.
If you say I'm going to do it for free, then almost everyone is going to say, yeah, sure. Even if they don't really care that much about getting that data.
Yeah, it's just a little complicated because I might want to do the ETH...
Pioneer Fellowship.
Exactly, that one.
Okay.
And you can't be incorporated.
Okay.
And also I don't have a visa to incorporate a company yet.
Oh.
So there's a lot of issues.
Wow.
But then hopefully if I can generate a little bit of revenue, I can just start building more sensors, installing them in key locations, getting a bit more money, and hopefully I can... But that's ideal case. Probably I will have to find money at some point.
Yeah, I see. Okay. So I guess in the beginning it's going to be just you doing basically everything. One thing that we haven't touched upon is the network and the whole software side of the data gathering pipeline and analytics and stuff. I don't know if that's something that you've already thought about or developed, or if that would be first teammate that you would look for.
You mean analyzing the data afterwards?
Yeah, and doing the IoT part of this.
So in terms of the data analytics, that's something that really interests me because I really like science, and that's what I'm doing right now in my PhD. And I was speaking with someone from WWF Austria, and I was asking them if this type of data would be useful for them. And they said what would be useful for them would actually be a consultant. So if there was actually someone in the company that was looking at that data and then consulting them. So that could also be, I don't know, something that I would incorporate in the future.
Right.
In terms of the IoT, I have a really, really amazing student working with me right now, and he completely took over all of the PCB design, which makes my life incredible.
That's amazing.
And he just, because my first prototype, I built it, it worked. The optics were the most important part of it's the sensing component, and that worked. But everything else, like power consumption, just everything. It was, I built it completely wrong. Like, I built an entire system on 5 volts, and I was powering it with like a 9-volt battery. And then, I mean, I guess for you, you don't know what that means, but
I don't see the obvious flaw.
No, it's so flawed.
Okay.
And now he built it from scratch, and he made it all on 3 volts, which means, it's a good thing. It's
more efficient, or
it's a good thing. And he's also really interested in LoRa, long range, like sending with radio frequencies. That's what we're actually, on Monday, we're going to drive to the Rhone. That's a river in Switzerland. And we're going to see if we can send data from the glacier, because that's where I want to install one of my sensors. And then, hopefully if we can send data from the glacier, then, and I install the sensor there, then I will know if it's running, if it's full of water, if it's stolen.
Yeah. And how, what are the maintenance requirements for the sensor? Because you mentioned the battery, so is it going to run out of power at some point?
It will run out of power at some point. I'm hoping those are things, I mean, I'm giving those things to future Jess.
No, you got enough on your plate.
But I mean, the current sensor that we used in Albania, it lasts like 9 to 10 months on batteries.
Oh, okay.
So it should be possible to get at least, I'm hoping, a year on batteries.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
Right now, we can get like a month.
Okay. No, but that's fine. I mean, it's a prototype. So good enough for testing. So for the last part, I just want to do some intuition-based questions.
Okay.
So you can answer them in 1 word or in 1 sentence or as long as you want.
Okay.
But yeah, they're meant to just like be like, I don't know, quick answers, like gut feeling questions. So what's on your bucket list? Is the first one. Yeah. Your bucket list.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind is to kayak the Grand Canyon. Because I'm going there in March.
Wow. That's sick.
So I guess my second bucket list question is to put a sensor on my boat when I go to the Grand Canyon. And then I'm going to have a super cool data set that no one has.
Wow. So you could actually check off your full bucket list in like a few months.
Yeah.
That's nice. It's a good place to be. Do you have an idol or a person that you really look up to?
I do, but people are going to laugh.
Well, it doesn't matter.
It's Taylor Swift.
Okay, nice. She's also into turbidity sensors?
She's not, but I just feel like she's one of these, I don't know her.
Yeah, no.
But she's just inspiring because she also doesn't listen to what other people say, and she's just like, no, I'm going to write songs, and it doesn't matter what people say, like people are buying the music. So that's also kind of my approach. I'm like, I'm just going to do this project and I'm going to figure out how to do it. Yeah. Oh,
that's super inspiring. What was the last time you were pleasantly surprised about something?
I went on Sunday to do cross-country skiing.
Ooh. Skate skiing?
Like, have you done cross-country skiing before?
No, but I know what that looks like.
So there's like the classic, which is in the tracks, and then there's skating. Because part of my personality is that I signed up for the Engadine half marathon. Have you heard of that? It's like the largest cross-country marathon in the Alps.
Wait, marathon skiing?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I've never done it before.
Nice. Well, it's in a group, I guess.
Yes, but a bunch of my friends were doing it, and I thought, that looks super fun. I'll learn how to cross-country ski. So I went for the first time on Sunday, and it was brutal. Like, the first hour was horrible. I was like, oh, maybe I should cancel. But then the second hour got better, and I really enjoyed it. I really like it.
You know how to ski, though?
I can ski.
Okay.
I can skate.
Okay.
So this is something in between.
Yeah, but I guess
Every Canadian knows to skate.
Okay.
So, no, and then the second hour was a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think I will be able to accomplish the half marathon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And yeah, I wanted to ask, like, Switzerland or Canada? If I just say that, like.
I mean, I guess I have to say Switzerland because I want to stay here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Why do you want to stay?
For me, it's just I already have a life here. I mean, I've been here through all of my 20s, basically. I'm 29 now.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be so easy to go back. If I go back now, I mean, I wouldn't go to Montreal. I wouldn't go back to my hometown.
Okay.
So I would probably go to Vancouver, and then I would have to restart my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to yourself in high school?
In high school. Oh.
That's so far away.
Huh? You don't need to know exactly what you're gonna do. Like, what's nice in Switzerland is that I feel like there's a lot of room to pivot, and you can do a Berufs, or you can, I don't know, you can switch. I feel like in I don't know, maybe in Canada, I feel like I had a lot more pressure to figure out in high school exactly what I wanted to do, and then you had to stick to it. And I actually tried to do that. I mean, I went all the way and finished a master's in combustion.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't necessarily, just because you have a degree in something doesn't mean you can't pivot. All those skills are applicable across different fields.
No, I feel that that's something that a lot of high school students tend to think, that what they choose is like what they'll have to spend the rest of their lives on.
Yeah.
So no, that's. What's the coolest piece of tech or software that you've learned about in the past month?
Oh, my Fitbit. I got it on the secondhand market for $30.
Oh, wow.
Or 30 francs on Saturday. And I know so much about myself that I didn't know before.
Know yourself.
Yeah.
With Fitbit.
I know that I thought that I'm sleeping horribly.
Yeah.
And this Fitbit tells me that I have excellent sleep.
Okay.
And I don't feel that way.
Nice. Well, sounds like a good investment.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Nice. Does the future trouble you or excite you?
Can you tell from my sigh?
Well, excitement is not exactly what I felt in that sigh.
No, I get really overwhelmed, I think. Like, for me, I always try to position myself. So I guess to answer the question, I don't know, something in the middle. Because I always try to position myself, like not to make too many plans in the future, because I really like to be open to all the opportunities that come. So in that sense, it's exciting because I'm open to a lot of new opportunities. But when I think about the things that I have to get done in the next month, and the next 2 months, the next 3 months before I go on my trip to the Grand Canyon, I'm really overwhelmed.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here.
No, this was fun. Thank you.
Even in this super intense period that you're going through, and all the best with finishing your PhD.
Thank you.
And at the Grand Canyon.
Thank you.
And yeah, if there's any any place where people can find out about you online, what would you send them to?
I guess the easiest thing would be my Instagram, because it has my a link to my blog and everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if people want to see epic shots of you going down the Grand Canyon in a few months, they should check there.
Exactly. Okay. So it's at RiverTechJess. I guess you will add it
we can add
the
that.
show notes.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe to the show on whatever platform you use. And don't forget to share this podcast with anyone interested in entrepreneurship, university student life, and the rising minds and technologies of the future before they change the world.